everyone, my name is Virginia Duan, also known as Mandarin Mama. I'm the host of the Noona ARMY Podcast, which is where I discuss the particular aspects and challenges of being a middle-aged BTS fan. And today, my special guest is Dr. Mike Campos. So, why don't you introduce yourself, Mike?
Hi, everybody. I'm so honored to be on Virginia's podcast. This is a first for me because typically I'm used to being in front of high school teenager. Well, what's the difference, right? But I'm always used to being in front of like high school kids and whatever. But at the same time, to be able to explore similar themes is, I think, really exciting for me. But yeah, I work as a high school teacher by day. And sometimes I engage in academic work and ask questions around self-identity and what it means to be queer.
Yes.
Thank you.
Plug your book. What's your book?
No book at the moment.
But you have the...
Oh, yeah, we have this one book like years and years ago called, what do you call this? Oh my God, I forgot the title of the book. Oh, Queering Migrations Towards, From, and Beyond Asia. It's an anthology by a group of us. We call ourselves Emerging Queer Asian Religion Scholars. And actually, we've been meeting regularly during the pandemic just to talk about some of the implications of the pandemic for Asian and queer people of faith and what that might mean in terms of negotiating these spaces where bodies can't really interact, where all the signifiers of race are kind of all over the place. So let's see if that becomes a book. I don't know.
Yes, or at least something.
Something.
All right. So today, so Mike has seen like one BTS video, which is Singularity, and fell in love with them. And we've had several conversations where he just listens to me like gush about BTS, and it's actually somewhat embarrassing. And then also, I think you've listened to The Truth Untold, and I think we were having several conversations in general about identity and the masks that we wear as people, and hiding from ourselves and our true selves, and the fear we have when interacting with people. So I thought we would discuss that.
Ooh, right.
Easy topic today. I was wondering, so you had mentioned that you love the video Singularity, and I was just curious, like since that was the first thing you saw of theirs, like what about it made you respond so positive? Like what spoke to you about that video itself and the song?
It's kind of interesting. It's funny because oftentimes when I listen to music, my first reaction to it is oftentimes through the melody and the rhythm. And then after that, because we've started to couple music, melody, rhythm with words, and then of course with visuals through music video, then it becomes this multi-dimensional experience for me, right? And one of the things, interestingly enough, with Singularity that I was drawn to was actually the visual. I love the play of light and dark. I love the play of penetration and piercing through light as well as space. I really found that fascinating, especially when it came to that image around the lake. Or at least, when I was reading through the lyrics, the idea of water as this barrier between two worlds, and how one actually either chooses to stay only on one side and sort of assumes to know what's going on the other side, or you take the courageous act of penetrating it and trying to see whether what you see is really what is. So I love that image of, I guess, the boundary crossings and a lot of the violations that take place when one crosses light and dark, the stability of water and space. Very much. That was really powerful.
Could you talk more about what you mean by like violations of space?
Because sometimes, when you think about bodies, of course, I'm trained primarily in theology. So if that's the case, then I look at image and I look at all of these artifacts of culture through theological lenses. And because of that, I'm always drawn to some of the mythical elements that are hidden behind this imagery. So the reason why I look upon it as violation was primarily because when you think about the lake and the person looking into it. I mean, you're drawn back to the story of Narcissus.
Yes.
A mythical figure who basically fell in love with a reflection of himself and died because he wanted to sort of grasp that which he thought was real, which is sort of ironic because that which was real was really himself, the one on this side of that mirror. So when you're actually penetrating, when you're violating that space that's sort of allotted for you, do you really touch something which is much more meaningful, much more grounded, much more expansive or real, or is it simply an illusion? So two things happen when you break through the spaces that are quote unquote allotted for you. Either you realize that the world that you're living in is really small, or you perhaps realize that this aspiration towards something more is really an illusion. So either way, you're taking a risk. But the ethical choice that I think always comes up is whether you choose to penetrate that barrier or you don't. And that always comes up when you're confronted with some metaphors around walls, like whether it be a literal wall or whether it be a mirror to yourself, seeing yourself in a different way for the first time through how other people see you. That itself is that metaphorical wall that you're either compelled to play into or maybe break through.
This has elevated my entire pandemic experience.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Okay.
This is no, in the sense of like, I don't think I've had such a, like, my brain was like, oh my God, I understand these words, but I don't understand them together. Wait.
How the hell did they work together? I know.
And then I was like, wait, I think I'm catching on. No, he's too smart.
No. Or basically, I'm really just trying to understand. Well, anyway, or I think what you're seeing is simply just me reacting to the video, and that was the first thing that I saw.
No, but that's so deep. And the thing is, I'm not. It was not a criticism. It was just more like, wow, I know such smart people.
Oh, God, girl.
And then and also I was like, oh, you know what? I just need to talk to Mike when I'm getting like a little bit too full of myself. When I think I'm deep, I need to talk to Mike. I need to talk to Mike, and then
no, you need to teach high school.
No.
It's a nice reminder.
And then I need to remember that no, I'm not that deep. In fact, I'm a real basic bitch, and I'm really shallow.
Girl, you're not basic. You just be amongst high school students every day, and then you realize, oh, there's a lot you can learn from basic, from what basic is supposed to be, right? Because they teach me things a lot, actually.
So I found it. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go.
No, so I was so interested that you mentioned narcissist, because that is many people have interpreted that video as referencing narcissist, and then also Ophelia,
right,
from Hamlet, right?
Exactly,
because you know she drowned in the water, and then she, like, I mean, it's pretty dumb to like kill yourself over a dude, but I understand.
I know.
But yo, especially Hamlet, because Hamlet is such a milquetoast person. Like,
why would you do that for this guy?
Yeah.
But you know, it is interesting though here, because in so many ways, although there's that suggestion of a lover, the lover never really appears in the whole video either, right? The lover is in so many ways nothing but like a coat rack or a coat hanger, which is kind of hilarious the whole time.
Yes.
So when you're looking at that lake, and even the lyrics were talking about like reaching for something. And then you start wondering, like, well, who are you really reaching for? So that's why this whole narcissist paradigm is pretty much like, okay, it's kind of obvious here, the paradox that's happening. You're reaching for something, but that something that you're reaching for is simply a reflection of yourself. But then the other thing that I thought was really, even for me, was more compelling were the proliferation of masks.
Yes.
And that for me was my first reaction to it. At least the way I started looking at it was much more, probably more theological. So the mythological framework was more theological for me. So, oh God, I can't believe I'm going to go for this, but
yes, do it.
So the Trinity, I can't believe I just like talked about the Trinity.
Yes, this is the best podcast ever.
Like, whatever, like, what the hell? You know, so, you know, it's kind of interesting for me. One of the biggest conundrums of Christianity was really trying to make do with explaining how this experience of God through Jesus in so many ways can be articulated in a way that maintains the monotheistic tradition that Christianity emerged out of, with Judaism. Like, how do you explain the fact that this person, this nobody from Galilee, could somehow evoke for us either God's will or some experience of God, whatever, and how that attempt to articulate that experience became even more complicated once Christianity shifted into the Roman era, or not the Roman era, but the Roman worldview, where you have these Neoplatonic elements, this whole division around what is the divine and what is considered to be the profane, sacred and profane, that whole division thing. And so one of the effects of that was really this notion of Jesus as both human or divine. One, great. But then the other effect that that gave birth to was the Trinity. The idea that if we can begin claiming that there's this one human person that can embody so much the divine, then one of the effects of that was somehow trying to explain how this supposedly divine figure, which in the Platonic world should not be interacting with the created world, the resolution to that, ironically, was the doctrine of the Trinity. Now, what the hell does that have to do with BTS? Well, because, one of the things that I thought was interesting was the language that the Greeks used was the idea of the mask, the persona. So three persons in one God. And, most of us that have at least dabbled in some theology are familiar with that language, right? Like, so when you're talking about three persons in one God, the word person is actually derived from the word persona, which literally means a mask. So you're talking about a God who in so many ways plays with different personas. So God that actually is singular, one God, but has different masks that God utilizes to interact with humanity. You have one mask that's human and in flesh. You have another God that's creator and therefore removed and transcendent, and you have another God that's immanent, close to us. So, you have all of these different persons, masks, persona, that's actually interacting with us. So, when I was watching that, I was thinking, this is really actually kind of fantastic, because in so many ways, when you're talking about boundary crossing, right? Earlier, when I was thinking about watching that video and looking at the way in which this main figure crosses between light and dark, crosses between this side of the mirror to that side, we could take that literally, but we're also talking about how you and I, at an ordinary level, every day, we cross those boundaries through the use of different masks.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so in so many ways, how different is that from images or imaginings of God who interacts with us through different masks, through different persona, different personifications. And in so many ways, actually, for me, is an easier way of explaining how so much more complicated people are in our negotiations, because we're not exactly the same kind of person for every person that we meet.
Yes.
We're not. And that itself is a theological, it's a theological experience. So to the extent that you can't really put persons in a box, how can you even put God in a box as well? To do that would be, in a way, a form of engaging in idolatry in so many ways. So when the mask itself becomes static, and you impose a particular kind of personality that should not be changing, that should be so-called authentic, any claims of authentic self itself becomes a form of idolatry. So anyway.
Wait. Say that again. Any form of authentic self is a form of idolatry?
Any claim?
Claim.
Any claim that there is an authentic self really hedges the line between a dynamic notion of who you are and idolatry. It really does. Because, you put yourself in a trap, like, this is my real self, and then somehow once you say that, you're kind of committed. Yes.
Right? But people can have layers. People have to, and it depends on, So all these things that popped into my mind as like my brain exploded with your like awesomeness.
Girl.
No, I'm so serious. It's really unfair that you're packaged so attractively and then your brain is also so attractive. Like, how did people resist you? But I forgot but like when you were saying about persona, so BTS has their last two albums are based on Carl Jung's map of the soul. So one of their songs is it's about the journey of the persona to the shadow and ego. And then but also about the masks. So I have always interpreted the song as an internal. And yes, I thought that they used like a lover in sense, so I also to like symbolize yourself. Right. But the lover is more like a distraction. Like it's actually the real problem is that they have hidden themselves.
Right.
And they have lied to themselves this whole time. They have frozen themselves.
Oh, that's awesome. Right. So
right?
they're like, and
then they're finally thawing and they don't know what to do. Right.
Right.
They don't know. Right. They don't know whether this person that has thawed is going to be accepted, is going to be loved. Is it even the real them? Is it they think it's the real them, and it's not the person that the lover wants or wanted, right? So I always saw the lover as sort of like an external catalyst to this self-revelation. So I always thought you could look at the song as like both as like how you relate to a person, right? Like giving your real self to somebody, but also in discovering who your real self is. But it was so interesting for me to think of not the way you like interpreted it is in like we are all always like this. Like we are all always taking and removing masks, and that it's not just your personal relationship with yourself. It's not just like an intimate relationship with a lover, but it is with any person that you deal with, and that just expanded the song for me, or the like meaning of it for me. And then like the concept of masks, I thought of several things. Like, have you ever read "Till We Have Faces" by C.S. Lewis?
I don't think I have. Why have I heard of it? We have faces?
Till We Have Faces.
Oh, Till We Have Faces. Oh my God. No, I'm going to take note of that, actually.
It is my favorite book of all time. It is my favorite book of all time. It is C.S. Lewis's retelling of the myth of Cupid and Psyche.
Oh, wow. God, that's awesome. Oh my God.
It is, I just got chills. But it is, I think I read it in college. And it is transformative. And it talks about how it tells a story from one of the older sisters' point of view.
Okay.
And just like it touches on how the creation of myths, like, and then also can we actually see God face to face? And when we do see God face to face, like and we demand an audience, like what are we actually saying? And what answer would suffice? Right. And even if you saw God, would you actually believe it? Or are you just lying to yourself because it doesn't fit the narrative that you've created for yourself? But in one of the parts, she talks about Ungit, and I guess that was a very old version of Venus.
Right.
And she talks about how in the old temples, Ungit, the statue of Ungit was actually just a rock with many faces. It was just like a slab of rock with like weird faces. And then she complains that she doesn't like the new Ungit. She doesn't like how the Romans have turned her into Venus and given her this beautiful face and figure. Because the stone slab was much more terrifying. Because somehow they tamed and like changed Ungit into like this palatable face. Right. But it's the amorphous, ugly face that is the true God. Right. So I thought that was very interesting. But then I was also thinking of like the seraphim. Right. Because they have four faces, the four head or four faces, right? Like the constantly, and how you're talking about like the different faces of God. And I thought it was very apt that seraphim. It's like what, an eagle, a bear, I don't know. But now that you mention all the masks that we all wear and that we constantly navigate and take off, then we have millions of masks. We have millions of faces. I would say that we have a face for every person that we interact with. Right.
And it really just, I thank you so much for highlighting, this whole evolution of Venus and the whole idea of what is the more authentic version of it, right? Because in a lot of ways, it's been an old trope. God, I hate using that word, but it is. It's a trope, in
right.
any language around God, right? So, we go back to even Moses, where Moses' encounter with God was not so much a person with a face, but a burning bush, and so when we think about the ways in which we've always struggled as people to sort of define this other that we're encountering, the question that always raises for me, and this is what came up in the video, and this is exactly what you were talking about, was who are we really encountering, and why do we have such an extreme reaction to it? Either we want to possess it or we're totally averse to it. And so the deeper question for me is really, are we in so many ways either encountering a part of ourselves that's so foreign as to be frightening?
Yes.
Or are we encountering a part of ourselves that requires such care and empathy? Or are we seeing a part of ourselves that might that's so attractive that we're just so drawn to it? And I think at the end of it, I think the reason why in Christianity is an interesting religion for me, because on so many ways, at least Judaism and Islam are clear.
Yeah.
We will not have any image of the divine, of God, simply because to even name God is in itself sort of really walking that fine line between trying to own God, and so we won't even name God. Like Islam developed an entire artistic tradition without drawing God, so this whole calligraphic artistic tradition, which is fantastic. And of course Judaism came up with like numerous placeholders for God's name, without articulating God's name, because it's just too close to taking ownership of this other. Whereas Christianity is really playing with fire, we really do. Even so much as basically saying that God has different masks, assuming that we can somehow read what those masks might mean. And I think that's the reason why one of the effects, I think, of Christianity is this almost narcissistic element, to go back to that image. Like there's this narcissism that sort of rears its head over and over again. Like for some reason we believe that we can understand God. But is it really about God that we're talking about? Is it this narcissism about the fact that we have this strange capacity to understand who we are? And that's why I like this video, because even though a lot of the suggestions was this yearning for this other, this other really never makes an appearance in the video. Never.
And you could argue that the other is actually themselves.
Yeah.
Like
and I think at the end of it,
yeah. And that they themselves are so alien.
Yeah. Yeah, very much so. And it's kind of frightening when you start to see yourself as incomprehensible in that sense.
Yeah. And then I think, so when I first encountered this song, it came out May of 2018, and I'd already been kind of dabbling into BTS since like January of 2018, and then 2018 was the year that I had my like midlife crisis, and it just spoke so deeply into me. I just felt like I had been frozen over. I felt like I was that person frozen over,
right?
And it was kind of like humbling, because I think I feel like I've always been as authentic of a person as I could be at the time,
right,
throughout my life. But even then, just to see like, no, there's parts of me that I buried or didn't want to acknowledge or I've killed or whatever, right? And then but it's not dead. It's like a zombie because it's like, hey, yo, I'm here.
Right.
And then now you're like, oh, am I really like this? Or, oh, I don't want to acknowledge this. And then because I've always been obsessed. Forgive the tangent, but I promise it makes sense. I'm obsessed with like personality tests. So I'm obsessed with like the Myers-Briggs, the MSBT.
What's your MBTI?
Oh, do you want to guess? What do you think it is?
It has to be E.
Yeah.
I think you're almost an NNF
Okay, so I am an S. But when I first took it, I was an N. So I think I'm kind of, but definitely F and J.
Interesting. See, okay, got it.
What do you?
I sort of dabble between INFJ and INFP.
Oh.
Yeah. Very much the introvert, intuitive feeling. But
definitely big picture. I see.
Yeah, very, very big picture. Yeah. But anyway, sorry. So you're talking about personality tests.
Yeah. So I'm obsessed with them because I love being labeled. I love being categorized.
Interesting.
I love knowing that I'm an ESFJ. I'm like, well, that's what EFJs do. Like, and the reason why I hate like astrology and like zodiac sign things is because it's like, seriously, like these long dead stars are telling me what my personality is like. So like, okay, but it amuses me too because so many of this like so wide and vague, like everybody is this, right? But versus like, I feel like they're too broad of a category versus specific enough. And it could just be because I don't understand astrology categories as well. Right? I apologize if you're an enthusiast, but also that's why I'm so frustrated with the Enneagram.
Oh, interesting. I was going to ask what your number was, but anyway, go on.
It's different every time.
I know, same here.
Really? Okay.
It's very, like, I've taken it, like, because my spiritual director would ask, what's your number? And I'm like, well, when I was in college, it was 6. I'm assuming it's not the same. And then I tried to take it like 3 times. It was different.
Yeah, I vary between 1, 8, and I think 2. 1, 2, and 8. Wow. And I think it just depends on what context I'm answering from. If I'm answering it in the context of like how I am personally,
right?
Like as or how I think, or am I answering it on how I behave? Because like it's very different. And then but I think I'm a 1.
Okay.
So people are like, no, you're kind of the need to be against. And I'm like, that's true too.
I've always thought I was a 4.
Yeah.
Go on. But anyway.
But yeah, so but I think. But it was so interesting to me when you said that, when you say that you found the authentic self, it's a form of idolatry. When all this whole time, it's seriously transformed my brain. Like this is like a totally new thought. Like it's so rare you get like new thoughts. You know what I mean? Like, or maybe I just don't read enough. But because I think this whole time I'm like, I need to find the right box to describe me.
Right.
I need to find the right box because consistency is super important to me. And so so I need, that's why the Enneagram frustrates me because it makes me feel inconsistent as a person.
Got it. Right.
You know, like, so like,
shift.
Yeah, like where's my box? I need things ordered. I need to tell you like, okay, this is how I'm predictable and blah, blah, blah. But now that you pointed it out as like, so this whole time I've been searching for an idol. I feel like this person, like I've been searching for this, I thought I was looking for my true self, but it's actually a fake. So that's why my brain is like, my mind is totally blown. It took like 30 minutes for my brain to catch up to what you were saying.
It probably took me like an hour to understand what the hell was I saying anyway. It is true though. And well, I mean, when I say it's true, but for me it resonates too, because like, for example, in the queer world, when I say queer world, then I'm using that really kind of loosely. And I don't mean to necessarily just say like LGBTQ folks or whatnot, but I'm talking about the ways in which we queer categories, one of the things that I've learned to appreciate is that this search for an authentic self, if not somehow tempered, can become a place of real power imbalance, right? And by the way, when I talk about authentic self, I'm not just talking about ourselves. And of course, I do the same thing where I'm looking for some marker to understand me, which is important, right? Like, I know I'm an introvert, so I'm not going to put myself in a freaking situation where I'm talking to 5 million people and I have to like, ha ha ha, be happy for the next 5 hours, you know, like, I'm not doing that, you know, like, I'll write a paragraph or something like that, right? And at the same time, it's really more the kind of authenticity that I feel is sort of imposed on us. And that's also dangerous, or at least for me, kind of, at least invites reflection. So, for example, not to go too big picture too quickly, but it's kind of interesting for me how with all of the pandemic going on, there's a lot of conversation around race again, right? Because let's be real. In terms of access to medical care, folks of color, at least it seems to be showing, some studies are showing that they tend to get less access. But then we also have these emerging narratives, and I know Russell Jung here at SF State has been really at the forefront of that conversation, where anti-Asian sentiments are on the rise again. And those were, for me, interesting for two reasons. One, well, because real bodies like ours are somehow pegged as one thing, that you are this authentic whatever you are thing, and therefore you deserve to be treated in this way. And so it's another kind of mask imposed on you, and if you're wearing that mask, then therefore you have the right to receive this kind of a treatment. So, you know, there's a difference between trying to find an authentic self that's internal, which is sort of a privilege in so many ways, and then having to confront a self that's sort of put on your body by certain social expectations, and now you kind of have to live with the effects of that, and that is hard. And that's what I've been thinking a lot about, you know, when it comes to what this pandemic is, because not only are you dealing with something, I mean, I'm using the word basic sarcastically, like fundamental, like your body, that can and very well could die. And that is itself a carrier of death. And so I'm walking down the damn freaking street, and the most ethical thing that I can do is avoid people. And I try to be nice about it by making eye contact as I'm covered, like, hello, avoiding the street. But then at the back of my head, I'm also kind of like, the person might see that I'm Asian. What might that person be thinking about me? And so I'm doing two things where I'm taking care of that person by trying to avoid them, trying to signal that I'm not avoiding you because I'm afraid of you. I'm avoiding you because I want to protect you. And then being afraid of that person because I know that I'm wearing this persona that represents in so many other people a carrier, right? Or some form of a threat. So yeah, that so-called authentic self is a double-edged sword. And so resisting that, I think, for me has always been an ethical choice. The idea that there's such a thing as an authentic person who's supposed to be my grounding. To what extent is that more of a trap than it is really freeing? You know?
I feel like so many thoughts have been crammed into my brain in this 38-minute period of time, and my brain's like, yo, you haven't used me in a long time. This might not work out.
It's so strange though, right? Because that's what I liked about the video. For me, the reaction was visceral. For me, it was a very visceral reaction. It was like, this is really cool. It almost was painful, actually, to watch it. And by the way, when I say pain, I'm not talking about like, oh God, I'm going to enter. No, but pain in the sense of, but it's painful to sort of start owning the reality and the fact that in so many ways, who you are is what you make of it. Oh, I can't believe I just said that publicly, but I'm going to say it. Yeah, that who you are is what you make of it, and that this idea of a authentic, real self that we're always spending our entire life searching for might actually be an illusion.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it might actually be more harmful for us than not. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what. So in the BTS fandom, and actually in most fandoms, they always joke about like the duality of these members. Like, oh, they're so baby, and then oh my god, they're so sexy.
Right.
And they like joke about it, and they talk about like, oh, and it's kind of like in the song, this video too, right? It's like such a sensual, like, physical, like, seductive song. But on the flip side, well, the song itself is a mask, right? Because it sounds sexy and seductive and like, hey, let's make babies. But the actual lyrics of it, right, are deep pain, right? And like deep, like, I'm hiding myself. I'm buried. I don't know who I am. And then the dance,
right?
You know, the choreography is again another mask, right? Because it's so much faster than the actual beat of the song.
Oh, that's true.
Right?
Oh my god, you're right.
So it's another layer, another mask, and then they have
so cool, right?
Yeah. And because when you hear the song, you don't think of that type of choreography, right? Because the choreography is very frenzied, right?
And that's why it feels almost like this uncomfortable feeling to it. Because it's because you're right, it does sound like a makeup song. Oh, sorry, that's my queen side. It's a makeout song. It sounds like a makeout song. But at the end of the day, you're right. It felt uncomfortable, like literally. There was this disparity between what I was seeing and what I was hearing. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, it's a total cognitive dissonance. And so, like,
right.
I think what I was starting to realize, and BTS explores that theme a lot in their songs, and because people always try to label them. Are you an idol? Are you a rapper? Are you a hip hop artist? Are you a K-pop? Did you transcend K-pop? And they're like, yo, we don't care what you, in the song Idol, which I used to not like, but now I realize the lyrics are just really deep. They're like, you know, I don't care what you call me.
Right.
You can call me artist, you can call me idol. It doesn't change who I am. And there's a line that actually I already knew before they used it in this verse, which is I contain multitudes. I think it's Buddhist, but like, right, the idea of so just I think it was very helpful. What has attracted me so much about BTS and their like talks about identity, because pretty much they're not all their songs, but it's just like an overarching theme of their discography, which is discussing identity, whether it's as a student, whether it's as what society is imposing on you, to like, oh, you need to work hard, go to university, get a stable job, or, you know, or about love, or just who they are as people. But I realized, like, part of the reason why I set my life on fire when I was 40, or I was turning 40, was like, I felt like, well, am I a mom? Like, am I just this frumpy person with like, who just pops babies out of her vagina, like I'm some like vending machine? And then like, or am I like a deep thinker? Am I like a writer? I used to like really care about being passionate about things. And I realized like, I totally don't care about being passionate about things anymore. It's just not interesting to me. And I think that happened around like 20 something. And I was just like, no, I'm done with that passionate thing. I don't like. I'm fine with just like stable small things, right? Like, but I guess what I mean is like those, and I think constantly again, like with the personality test, I'm like, no, but which one's the real me? Like as if I can only be either or. Like, and I guess that's what I mean. That's why I found your comment about the authentic self being an idolatry of sorts, because the authentic self encompasses so many selves,
right.
And that they're real, and depending on the situation, depending on the time, the era, the age, your experience, that authentic self is constantly in flux, right? It's not static. And so in some sense, like the masks aren't really masks. If that makes sense. It's just like, I think this whole time I've been thinking of the masks as bad things. Like, oh, you want to take off your mask,
Right.
But now that you've said what you said, and this is, I think in the world of BTS, they say the masks are bad, right? Like that's.
Oh, really? It's a negative connotation?
I don't know if it's negative, but it's basically that you're hiding, right? You're hiding behind these masks, or it's part of who they are. They have as idols, they have their persona.
Right.
They have their shadows that they deal with, and then they feel like they've finally ended up in the ego where they're like integrated, right? And that it took them a long time to get there. And I feel like for me, it's interesting to possibly see it as the masks aren't necessarily false. They just represent different faces of who you are. And that if you, I guess it all ends up being like, this sounds kind of convoluted. I'm still working it out. Hence the extroversion. But like, I guess the reason why we think the masks are fake is because we think that the mask has to stay there the whole time. It's versus we think of the mask as something we put permanently on our face.
Right.
But if we think of them as like clothes or like
like
a symbol to represent how you are at this moment,
right,
then it's not necessarily it's useful. It can be a useful tool.
It's like that, in grade school where you have, how am I feeling today?
Check
off that thing. So this is my mask today. This is my mask today. And that doesn't feel inauthentic.
Mm-hmm.
I love the image that you were describing because, is it real when you put on a different mask? There's almost a part of me that is really drawn to that gap between the skin and that mask, right? Because we sort of assume that there's such a chasm, like it's almost like this totally different essential quality to that mask, which is in proximity to your face.
Mm-hmm.
And we assume that gap is what keeps the face, the skin, kind of real. Like that's really the core. And, to go back to your image of a person who puts on different masks, like there's just different sides of us. I would even go so far, at least for me, that even the idea that there is a person, I'm not really sure whether it's something that I resonate with. And again, this is more me. I'm not trying to be hyper philosophical about it. It's more, I'm not even sure whether there is such a thing as a static self. Because it's kind of funny you talk about MBTI, right?
Right.
Because for some reason, when I was in high school, or was it in seminary, they made us take the damn thing over and freaking over again.
Oh, really? The whole 500 question version?
Oh my God, it took 5 hours to do the damn thing. And I remember, for some reason, it was such an important tool. I don't know why. Oh, I know. At least in seminary, I know exactly why they were doing it. Like they gave us this barrage of psychological tests. And then this is so 1980s, which of course is, 3 decades ago or 4 decades ago, but they were so obsessed about IQs.
Oh, yeah.
They made us take IQ tests, and this is what they did. So they made you take IQ tests, and then after that, they rank you according to your IQ. They rank you according to IQs, and then they would rank your academic output, and if you fall several notches below your IQ level, then they assume that you're not living up to your potential. But if your IQ level is low and then your academic ranking is 5 above, then you're maximizing your potential. And I'm just what the hell does that even mean? It almost assumes that all you are is just this core that is sort of that just needs to be massaged. That's how it appears to me, and that for some reason our goal in life is to maximize that core. And I felt that it was so imprisoning because it also didn't resonate with my own life experience as a person, because who I am now at 48 is so different from who I was when I was 18.
Yeah.
I don't even look at the world in the same way, and I don't even know whether I don't even know if I'm the sum of many, many parts. Is that what it is? Am I just this core where you just had shells added onto it, but I'm still essentially the same core? Not really sure.
Are you a hermit crab or are you something different?
Yeah, exactly right. I don't know. The octopus is a little bit more attractive to me. Like,
I know. And they're smart.
so yeah, I mean, and again, the reason why it's so complicated is primarily because at the end of the day, we can't forget, at least for me, I cannot forget the fact that that core of a self is constantly negotiating with how I am read outside. And how at least when this physical thing walks into the social space, it's a totally different ballgame. Now I have to deal with how people read me.
Yeah.
Now I have to deal with how I want people to read me. It's a game, so...
And it's always been that way, but it's heightened now, right? Because the
It's even
consequences
more.
are so much more life and death.
Well, yeah, and then you go back to the pandemic and all of that situation. But I mean, I was just thinking about it in terms of our regular negotiations. Right?
Oh, yeah.
And I guess, maybe as a single person, maybe that's the reason why I secretly envy people that live in some form of a committed relationship. Okay?
So you
Because
can hate each other equally.
oh, totally. Like every day you have someone to like you have someone to project all of your anxieties towards your what do you call this? Your psychosis and whatever.
Right.
But at least there's a part of me where if you're always forced to relate with an other, it actually gives a better sense of, it gives at least a better understanding of what makes you tick. Whereas I think as a single person living alone, it's far too easy to get caught up in my own, what do you call this, thought bubble. And I get caught up in confirming only those things which I think I want to believe in, or things that I think I...
Oh, like an echo chamber.
Pretty much, yeah, an echo chamber. That's all it is. So
it's so interesting because you made me think of another thing. Actually, I thought of it earlier too, but you just reminded me again. It's another C.S. Lewis book called, in case you can't tell, C.S. Lewis formed a lot of my thinking
I know.
when I was in college.
Beyond the Chronicles of Narnia, which I grew up with. But anyway, yes,
I love Chronicles.
I know.
I love the Chronicles. Even though now, as I've listened to like it as an adult, because my kids like to listen to it a lot in Chinese, so I've listened to like the Chronicles of Narnia like in full like a bajillion times in the last few years. It's like a really racist, ethnocentric, like Anglo-centric view of the world, right?
And Christos, very Christian, right?
yeah. So he wrote a book. Well, I guess it wasn't really a book. It was his journals after his wife died.
Oh, okay.
Have you read that?
I think I've actually read pieces of that. Yeah, I remember that book.
So what has been the thing that I carried the most from it was how when someone dies, it's not just that person who dies. It is, you actually lose the parts of your friends that person brought out.
Wow.
Because because you're not, that's why when you start meeting people, it's fun to see them in different environments with their friends. That's why they say like when you're in a relationship, you shouldn't marry someone until you've gone traveling with them and like met their families, because you want to see seen their friends, right? Because you want to see them negotiate different spaces, because those different types of people will bring out different sides of that person, right? So it was just very interesting to me, like again, like how you, like there is no, it's not that you're less authentic. It's that different people bring out or draw or call out different things to you. I don't know if I'm making sense right now.
No, it does. No, it really, really does. I mean, the closest I've ever been to a committed relationship, so I'm putting that in quotes, was, I think I had shared this with you, was when I was living in the monastery. The last time we were talking, I talked about that experience. And the reason why that was so pivotal for me, the hardest thing about living in a monastery, ironically, was not taking care of the freaking sheep. It wasn't like going out into the damn forest in the dead of freaking winter and then chopping down trees. It wasn't that. It wasn't even like bug season where I had to mow the freaking lawn when I can't believe I'm cussing all over the place. When I had to mow the lawn while the bugs were eating me alive. No, it wasn't even feeding the pigs or taking care of the chicken or anyway, nothing of those. Oops. I think for me, the hardest part was how to relate with the brothers, because in so many, and I think what made it even more difficult was because I went into that community with a very clear, my friend likes to use this word, I'm going to quote him. This is Hugo Cordova Quero. He's part of our collective, right? But it's like you go in there, and I went in with a very clear resume. Like I had a job description of who I was. Like, here's my resume, and this is what I'm bringing to your community. So it's almost a sense of self-righteous, like, this is my gifts that I want to enrich your community with.
You're welcome.
Exactly. Like, hi, I'm here. Okay. But at the end of it, I found that every category on that resume was literally falling apart the longer that I stayed there. That for some reason, things that I thought I was didn't quite hold up to the ordinary engagements of community life. That for some reason or the other, it came to a point where my crisis moment took place when I actually started wondering, and I know this sounds weird, like what made me tick? So I reacted to it in the typical way that a teenage coming to self would react to those kinds of moments. I rebelled, like I would do everything against the rule. Like I would be so tempestuous. I was such a petulant teenager at 30, like I would flout the rules. I would like wear funny things while everybody else was wearing habits, like little things like that. It was such a weird realization that that's how I felt. What I was trying to do was sort of own who I was. And at the end of it, and when I did leave the monastery, intuitively I knew that I wanted to teach much more than anything else, but I needed to almost identify a non-negotiable. It's like the ultimatum.
Yeah.
Isn't that how we break up with people? We give an ultimatum, and the ultimatum has one function. It's to establish a non-negotiable difference between you and that other person.
Yeah.
And because it's non-negotiable, there's no potential for conversation. There's no potential for a way forward, which was interesting because the whole purpose of of that whole monastic community is that we commit not to sameness or difference. We commit to conversation. Nothing is off the table. In fact, they're in the Benedictine life. I think I had mentioned this the last time. They are obsessed with this idea of conversatio morum, that through conversation, you're always shifting. And that, in so many ways, challenges the idea that there is such a thing as a real Mike or a real brother John or a real brother this or brother that. Like, no, conversation always actually puts you in the line. And conversation always is vulnerable, because if you really are conversing with another person, you're willing to read and be read. That means there really isn't a stable self that will need to be protected, because every part of you is on the line.
Wow.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, it's great. This is why I love talking to you.
Thank you. No, this is great. I always sort of go into this monastic drone. But anyway.
No, it's great. Okay, well, why don't we end it here?
Okay, cool. Awesome.
Since this is a nice stopping point.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening, everyone. Please like and subscribe and hit the notification bell if you're watching this on YouTube. Or please, like and subscribe and download us wherever you consume podcasts. And we'll see you next time.